I hadn't planned on seeing her that afternoon. I'd only stopped by the corner café because my laundry was still in the dryer, and I didn't feel like sitting in the laundromat staring at the spinning drum. The place was half empty, the kind of quiet where the hum of the espresso machine fills every pause. I ordered my usual, black coffee, nothing fancy, and leaned against the counter, scrolling through messages I'd never send. That's when she walked in. Not in some movie kind of way, all slow motion and spotlight. She pushed the door open with one hand, balancing her tote bag on the other, hair a little out of place from the wind. My friend's mom. Mrs. K. Or at least that's how I'd always thought of her. I hadn't seen her in months. She looked the same and completely different at the same time. She noticed me before I could duck my head. "Well," she said, smiling the way people do when they're not sure if they should recognize you. "You still drink it black?" I laughed, probably too quickly. "Yeah. Guess I'm boring like that." She set her bag down on the chair next to mine before I could decide whether I was staying. "Boring's not so bad. It means you know what you like." The line moved slowly. She tapped her fingers against the table, short nails, neat. I found myself staring, then caught it, looked away. My phone screen lit up with an unsent draft. "You around tonight?" No name in the text. Just a draft to no one, or maybe everyone. I turned it face down. We talked about nothing for a while. The neighborhood construction. The new bakery that closed too fast. She remembered that I used to skip whipped cream on hot chocolate. I remembered that she always brought her own thermos. Small things that shouldn't matter, but did. "You're quieter," she said at one point, tilting her head. I shrugged. Maybe I ran out of things to say. Her laugh was softer than I remembered. Not loud, just a kind of exhale that lingered in the space between us. She folded the napkin from her cup into smaller and smaller squares while I tried to find something else to look at. When her order was called, she stood, but didn't rush. "You still at the same place?" "Yeah. Across from the park." "That's not far." She nodded, almost like she was noting it for herself more than me. Then she picked up her coffee, slipped the folded napkin into her bag, like it meant something, and glanced at the door. I thought that was it. Just a chance run-in. But as she stepped out, she looked back. Not long. Just enough. The kind of look that makes you wonder if you imagined it. My coffee had gone cold. The cafe was still half empty. My phone buzzed on the table. A new message. Unknown number. Just one line, "Don't run. You knocked on my door first." I stared at it, not moving. The dryer would have finished by now. My clothes were probably sitting in a heap. But I couldn't make myself leave. Not yet. I didn't answer her message right away. I must have stared at it for 10 minutes, the words circling in my head, "Don't run. You knocked on my door first." I hadn't knocked on anything. At least, not literally. But I knew what she meant. 2 nights later, I found myself walking past her house. Not on purpose, I told myself. I just needed to clear my head, and the park led me down her street. The light in her kitchen window was on. She always kept it on low, a warm yellow glow that looked more like candlelight than electricity. I was about to keep moving when the door opened. "You're terrible at pretending," she said. Her voice wasn't sharp, just amused. She leaned against the doorframe, sweater hanging loose around her shoulders. I laughed, rubbing the back of my neck. "I was just walking," she finished for me. "Come in, then. Unless you're afraid of tea." Inside, her place smelled faintly of chamomile and something faintly burnt, maybe toast from earlier. The living room was neat but lived in, magazines in a small stack, a folded blanket draped over the armrest. She handed me a mug without asking how I liked it. We sat. At first, it was small talk again, weather, neighbors, things that didn't matter. Then she said, almost out of nowhere, I never thought I'd be divorced at 46. She didn't look at me when she said it, only at the steam rising from her tea. I shifted in my seat. I didn't know. Most people don't. Your friend, well, it's not something I wanted him talking about. I nodded, unsure if I was meant to respond or just hold the space. My hands circled the mug, though it was already too warm to touch comfortably. She finally looked at me, eyes steady. You're wondering why I texted you? I swallowed. Yeah. A little. She smiled faintly, almost like she was humoring herself. Because you remind me of something I used to want. Or maybe because you look like you're carrying something you haven't told anyone. I didn't answer. She was right, and the silence seemed safer than admitting it. For a while we sat with only the ticking of a wall clock filling the air. My mind drifted into places it shouldn't, imagined what it would be like if the mug slipped from my hands and she leaned over to help, how close her hair would fall across my arm. I caught myself and straightened. You should go before it gets late, she said softly. No edge, no command, just a suggestion. I stood, set the mug on the table. She followed me to the door. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she reached up, only to brush something from my shoulder. A bit of lint, nothing more. But her hand lingered just a second too long, her eyes catching mine with a weight that made it hard to breathe. Good night, she said, stepping back. I walked home, but the warmth on my shoulder stayed long after. I told myself I wouldn't go back. That night in her kitchen, the warmth on my shoulder, it should have been enough to warn me off. But a week later, I was there again. She opened the door like she'd been expecting me. No questions. Just that faint smirk, like she knew I'd lose the argument with myself. Inside, she poured tea again, though this time she asked, chamomile or green? Small shift. As if choosing mattered. We sat on opposite ends of the couch. Too far, yet not far enough. I noticed the way her sleeves slipped down her wrists, how she kept tugging them back like she needed something to do with her hands. I asked how her week had been. She shrugged. Too quiet. Then, after a pause, yours? Same. The silence stretched. My phone buzzed in my pocket, my friend. Her son. Just a quick, what's up tonight? Nothing suspicious. But the weight of it pressed on me, sitting across from her. She noticed my hesitation, the way I slipped the phone back without replying. You should answer him, she said. I shook my head. It's nothing. Her eyes lingered a little too long, as if she knew exactly who it was. She took a slow sip of tea, then set the cup down carefully, aligning it with the coaster like precision could hide everything else spilling out. I wanted to say something. Anything. But words scattered before they reached my mouth. Instead, I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. She mirrored the movement, closer now. A car passed outside, headlights slicing across the room. For a second it lit her face, tired eyes, the faint crease by her mouth, something unguarded there. She caught me looking, and didn't look away. I shouldn't, she started, then stopped. Her hands folded together in her lap. I tilted my head, waiting. I mean, she shook her head, almost laughing at herself. Forget it. But I couldn't. The way she said it stayed in the air, unfinished, heavy. The clock ticked. The hum of the fridge. My heart beat in my ears. I thought about closing the gap between us, about what it would mean. What it would break. She reached for her mug again, but her fingers brushed mine on the table. Just barely. The kind of touch that might have been an accident, except she didn't pull away right away. I exhaled, too loud in the quiet room. She looked up, eyes sharp, searching. Like she was waiting for me to do something reckless. I almost did. Leaning in, just slightly, enough that the air shifted between us. Enough that I could see the rise and fall of her breath. Then, knock at the door. We both jerked back. Her hand dropped to her lap. She stood, smoothing her sweater as if nothing had happened. Through the window, I saw her neighbor, waving with a bag of groceries. She opened the door, all polite smiles. I sat frozen on the couch, pulse racing, wishing for silence again. We didn't mention what almost happened. The knock at her door, the way we'd pulled back, it just disappeared into silence. But the tension followed me everywhere. I carried it like static under my skin. One late afternoon, I saw her sitting on the park bench across from my apartment. Coat draped over her shoulders, thermos balanced in her hand. She wasn't waiting for me. Or maybe she was. I crossed the street before I could second-guess myself. "You're early," I said, though we hadn't planned anything. She smirked faintly. "And you're predictable." She tapped the bench beside her. I sat, the wood cool under me. People passed, joggers, a mom pushing a stroller, a man walking his dog, but none of them belonged to this moment. For a while we just watched the trees shifting in the wind. She unscrewed the cap of her thermos, poured tea into the lid, and handed it to me. Her fingers brushed mine again, intentional this time. "Your friend texted me," she said suddenly. I blinked. "What?" "Just a photo from his trip." "He doesn't know, relax." Her tone was casual, but her eyes didn't match. There was something sharp there, like she was testing the ground between us. I swallowed the tea too quickly, the heat biting my tongue. "Right. Of course." She leaned back, exhaling. "You shouldn't be here." The words landed heavy. I stared at the path in front of us, a couple of leaves skittering across it. "Do you want me to go?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for the thermos again, pouring herself a cup she didn't drink. Her hand shook slightly. "I don't know what I want," she said finally. That cracked something in me. I turned, studying her face, the tired lines, the smirk that was gone now. "I keep thinking about that night," I admitted, my voice low. "About what almost," I cut myself off. The words felt too dangerous. Her eyes met mine, steady this time. "And what do you think would have happened if we hadn't been interrupted?" I froze. Tried to find a safe answer. There wasn't one. "I don't know," I whispered. But I wanted to find out. The silence stretched, taut as wire. She laughed once, but it wasn't humor, it was closer to surrender. "You're just a kid. You don't realize what this could cost." "I'm not a kid," I said, sharper than I intended. That broke through her composure. She looked at me then, really looked, like she was seeing past the years, past the labels. Something in her expression softened, then faltered, like she was pulling herself back before it was too late. The air between us changed, close, heavy, a heartbeat away from breaking. My hand shifted, just slightly, toward hers on the bench. She didn't move away. For a moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to that space, that breath, that impossible choice. Then she closed the thermos, stood abruptly, and said, "We shouldn't do this." And walked away, leaving the bench colder than before. After the park, I didn't see her for almost 2 weeks. No text. No late-night light in her kitchen. Just absence, stretched thin and sharp. I tried to tell myself it was for the best. That maybe the silence would cool everything down. But it didn't. I found myself checking the café window every time I passed, slowing near her street even when I swore I wouldn't. The empty spaces felt louder than the times we'd actually been together. One night, I saw her son, my friend, at the bar downtown. He was laughing, drink in hand, no weight on his shoulders. He didn't mention her. Didn't suspect anything. I laughed with him, but my stomach knotted with every passing hour. The next day, I caved. I walked past her house again. The blinds were drawn. Porch light off. A quiet, deliberate kind of closed. I almost knocked. Stood there with my hand half raised. Then the door opened, not to me, but to someone else. A man. Older, confident in the way he carried himself. He said something I couldn't hear, and she laughed. The same soft laugh I thought I'd pulled from her. I froze on the sidewalk, half shadowed by the trees. Watched her reach for the man's arm as they stepped inside together. The door shut. I walked home fast, pulse hammering. Every step filled with words I wanted to send but couldn't. My phone lit up in my pocket, her number, finally. We need space. 3 words. No explanation. I typed out replies, erased them. Space from me or space from yourself? Delete. Who was he? Delete. You don't get to vanish. Delete. In the end, nothing sent. Just a blank screen glowing in my hand. That night, I couldn't sleep. My apartment felt too small, every sound too sharp. I paced, sat, stood again. Imagined her kitchen light on, imagined her with him, imagined her thinking of me, or not thinking at all. A week passed like that. I didn't go back to the café. Didn't cross the park. My friend called once, asking why I'd been quiet. I said work. He believed me. Then, late one evening, I checked my messages again. Still nothing. My thumb hovered over her name, over the unsent drafts piling up in that thread. I typed one last thing, I keep ending up at your door. Even when I swear I won't. My finger hovered over send. Stayed there. Then I locked the screen. Put the phone face down. The message remained unsent. And her door stayed closed. It happened on a rainy evening, weeks after the last time I saw her. The kind of rain that makes streets reflective, every light doubled in the puddles. I hadn't planned it, didn't even realize where my feet were carrying me until I was already standing in front of her house again. Her porch light was on this time. The blinds half open. A sliver of kitchen glow spilling onto the wet steps. I almost turned back. Almost. But then the door opened, and she was there. You're soaked, she said. Not surprised. Not angry. Just, there. She stepped aside. Come in. Inside, it smelled like rain carried through the open window. She handed me a towel without asking. I stood in her kitchen, dripping, awkwardly drying my hair. She busied herself with the kettle, though the faint tremor in her hands gave her away. I didn't think you'd come back, she said quietly. I wasn't planning to. She half smiled, eyes on the kettle. And yet. The water hissed as it heated. Neither of us moved closer, but the distance didn't feel safe anymore, it felt unbearable. I wanted to speak but couldn't find the start. So I just said the first thing that came. I saw you. With him. She stilled, shoulders tight. Then, without turning, he's no one. Not really. The honesty in her voice cut deeper than denial would have. I set the towel down, stepped closer. Then why? Her laugh was small, brittle. Because it's easier than this. I didn't answer. Couldn't. The kettle whistled. She shut it off, left the cups untouched. Finally, she turned to face me. Her eyes were tired, but steady. This isn't fair to you, she said. Or to him. She stopped herself. You're too young to get tangled in my ruins. I don't care, I said, sharper than I meant. Then softer, I don't care. Her breath caught, just barely audible. She looked at me for a long time, as if weighing every possible future in that silence. Then she said, you should. The words were firm, but her hand betrayed her. She reached for the edge of the counter, steadying herself, then let her fingers trail off toward mine. They didn't quite touch, but the space between them burned. I moved first. Just an inch. Enough that our hands finally brushed. She didn't pull away. The kitchen was silent but for the rain tapping against the window. I could feel her pulse in the lightest graze of her fingertips. "This will hurt," she whispered, almost to herself. "Maybe," I said. "But I'd rather hurt here than not at all." Her lips trembled into something between a smile and surrender. Our hands stayed there, barely joined, fragile and real. "Okay," she said. And it was the smallest word, but it carried everything. Time didn't change everything. It just softened the edges. Weeks turned into months. The urgency between us, the pull, the fear, settled into something steadier, something lived in. There were still days when silence pressed heavy, when we skirted the truth of how we'd gotten here. But mornings came, and evenings followed, and somehow we learned how to stay. I still drank my coffee black. She still carried her thermos. Sometimes we sat on that same park bench where it nearly broke us apart. The wood was weathered now, one armrest chipped, but it had become ours anyway. "You're always here at 8:47, she teased once, glancing at her watch. I smiled. Old habits. She didn't say more, but she slid closer on the bench, shoulder brushing mine. That was enough. At her house, life carried on around us. Her son still came by sometimes, dropping laundry, telling stories about people I didn't know. She and I learned how to weave around that, how to fold ourselves into the ordinary without drawing attention. It wasn't a performance, it was survival. And somehow, survival became comfort. Evenings often ended in her kitchen. The same kettle, the same soft hiss of water heating. She poured tea, I leaned against the counter. We didn't need to fill every pause anymore. The pauses became their own kind of language. Once, she looked at me over her mug and said, "I used to think quiet was loneliness. Now it just feels like rest." I didn't answer. Just reached out and straightened the sleeve slipping down her wrist. She let me. That was our answer. It wasn't perfect. There were still doubts. The age gap lingered in the background like a shadow neither of us could fully erase. Some nights she stared out the window longer than she should, and I wondered if regret was whispering in her ear. Some mornings I caught myself imagining years ahead, and the weight of it scared me. But then she'd catch my hand absent-mindedly while folding a napkin, or I'd find her smirking at the way I always left my shoes by the door, and all the noise went quiet again. We built something small, maybe fragile. But it was ours. The bench. The black coffee. The thermos. The rain on her window. All the little things that shouldn't matter, and somehow mattered most. One night, as I was leaving, she stopped me at the door. Nothing dramatic. Just her hand brushing my arm, her eyes steady. "Don't run," she murmured, echoing that first message. I nodded, smiling softly. "I'm not." And that was it. No grand declarations. Just the quiet understanding that we had found a way to stay.